Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I am your host, Matt, and I'm joined by my friends Alex and Jem. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
So, today we are going to be starting a two-part series on Game Over, the end of the world, the end of the gaming world, the apocalypses and dystopias that are so often the setting for video games that are wildly popular and not just a very simple niche genre, which some areas can be, but apocalypses and dystopias are very popular. And we're going to explore them, see if we can unpack why they're so popular and what we think about them. So, part one, apocalypses. How would you two define an apocalypse?
It's a good question, Matt. I think an apocalypse is essentially a catastrophic event that probably kills a lot of people or destroys the world as we know it or changes it in some way irrevocably so that cannot go back to how it was and means that we have to change the way we live if we aren't already all dead anyway. I think that would be my definition of it.
How about you, Jem?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think it's basically the event of collapse or the immediate aftermath of that collapse. So I think a clear mutually assured destruction via nuclear weapons or something like that would be what I would say is an apocalypse. I think we often act like an apocalypse is a more like a lesser disaster in I think they use a lot of what's it called poetic license when they're talking about apocalypse, and we sort of talk about like things changing. So some people might talk about a financial apocalypse or something like that, where society as we know it collapses, but that's not the same as, I think, a genuine apocalypse where it's infrastructure, society, the vast majority of people are dead. I think that to me it's got to be massive to be an apocalypse.
I've read, so the journey that led me to wanting to talk about this is one where it's a downer. There's no happy and fun way to talk about the end of the world in a meaningful way. So there's a TV show from the 70s called Survivors. And I came across this from the Warhammer 40k lore channel Luton 9, because part of the Warhammer 40k narrative of the human race is the humanity got to the absolute transcendent pinnacle of technological wonderment. They were basically technological gods, but then there was a catastrophic event that happened that completely threw us right back into the dark ages. So it doesn't matter how extreme the technological prowess had been, humanity was absolutely pushed to the brink of just absolute destruction. And then it comes back up to become the dystopian post-apocalyptic world of Warhammer 40k, but that is 40,000 years in the past, or however many tens of thousands of years in the past. So it's a great big thing. And he did us a video about the end of civilization in contemporary art as a comparison to how the real world art compares to the 40k art. And I never really bought the premise that a civilization at such a zenith of like technical evolution, it could only fall so far down back from that. But he gave an overview of this TV show Survivors, and it's a spectacular, like, horror projection of an apocalypse. It's the best one I think I've ever seen. And so this is in the 70s, mind you. So it looks like an episode of Yes Minister. It's that, like, grainy, single, steady, it's like one camera angle, like stuck camera angle. And the first episode goes from everything's normal, and there's this flu virus going around, and people are getting ill, but things. And then the trains have stopped running. They can't ring people on the phone. They're not hearing back from people. And this, just that horrible creeping dread that it captures it incredibly well. And it ends up that there's this flu. They end up calling it the Death. The first episode is called The Fourth Horseman, which is death. And it kills all but one in every 5,000 people. So of every 4,999 die and one survive. And that's the most extreme, like, culling of humanity that I've seen that isn't because it's not as, like, simple as a nuclear Armageddon, where it's just there are survivors packed all, like, in, depending on where you are. It's literally, you've got a 1 in 5,000 chance. And in that very first episode, one of the women meets a professor who says that what happens next is going to be the most horrifying part, and saying how, right, look at all the stuff that we've got. How would you make that candle over there? How would you make that candle? And you go, well, we've got lots of candles to go. And go, yeah, but how would you make the wax, the rope? And that just made it clear how quickly in a few generations you could take us all the way back to the Stone Age. And so that has really put into perspective that it's not just about the horror of the collapse or the immediate aftermath of it. It's the long-term aftermath and the bleakness of it. And while it is very, like, just a bleak and pretty miserable prospect to look at, it's also fabulous art. And this is where gaming comes in. So I want to go into some of the games that we've played that are apocalypses that we really enjoy. And I'd also be interested in what the extent to which you both have, how much time do you spend thinking about the end of the world, or have spent thinking about the end of the world? So I'd be interested to hear that as well. I'll start us off with, I've talked your ears off already about Death Stranding and Death Stranding 2. That is very much the post-apocalypse, which is an interesting time, because I think the post-apocalypse is post-collapse society in the aftermath, and they'll have you, like, playing in the post-apocalypse, and you'll get, like, information fed to you gradually about the actual collapse. And so Death Stranding, the entire first game is them trying to work out what happened. And I find that's an interesting dynamic. The same goes for Horizon Forbidden West. It's going, the world collapsed and we don't know why. And finding, it's hard to have that be, like, an interesting mystery to spend an entire game wanting to find out the truth. Whereas in something like, say, The Last of Us, the truth is just that there was this mushroom that suddenly started infecting people, and that's that. That's like interesting as it gets. But then it's the post-apocalyptic stuff, and when the real horrors is what humans do to each other, and that's how it ends up. So, what are some of the games that you two have enjoyed in apocalypses?
So I had to really think about this because I think I've played probably more games about preventing apocalypses than games set in apocalypses. But I can name some for you now. Fallout, obviously, I've played it not all the way through, but I have played a fair chunk of Fallout 4. Horizon, Zero Dawn, and Forbidden West. Again, haven't finished those, but they're certainly set in a I guess an apocalyptic world. Yeah, no, it is because they've had to kind of revert back to being tribal people, as the machines take over the land, etc. What else? Stray, technically, although that is still on my yet to play list. That is a sort of apocalyptic, similar setting where sort of robots have kind of taken over as well. And then my favourite one about preventing an apocalypse is probably God of War Ragnarok as well. Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the one that springs to mind the most is Last of Us, Walking Dead, and well, I want to say Horizon, but I somehow feel like Horizon is set in a post-apocalyptic world, but it's set so far after it. I feel it's slightly different from The Last of Us and Walking Dead.
It's a fair point, definitely. I think The Last of Us and The Walking Dead are obviously like a bit more immediate, aren't they? But I think Horizon is interesting in that it explores a far future after an apocalypse, and then finding the apocalypse cause is like ancient times mysteries almost, isn't it? It's
yeah, and
cool.
I think you also get that kind of anxiety through the game, don't you? Because you keep stumbling on the story of it. So even though it's like long history, it still feels almost current because as you play through the game, you're uncovering the story of this apocalyptic disaster, and so it sort of feels like it's current. It feels like it's happening now, even though it isn't. So yeah, I suppose it's just I do think there is a distinction between these post-apocalyptic stories that are set in sort of the immediate aftermath and how do people recover, how do people deal with that situation, like Survivors, the series that you mentioned, Matt. And then you have these other ones that are set long after. For example, one that isn't a game but is beloved by many gamers is the Wheel of Time series, which is also set long time after an apocalypse. And the idea of the story is that you have this sort of cyclic apocalypse that happens on repeat. And as you read through the books, you come across things that make you go like, oh, hold on a second. This is sort of further more technology than they have in this world, or these are strange things that do different things, and it just gives that kind of hint at an ancient world that had perhaps more, generally more technology. So for me, I think it would probably be those games that I played. I didn't play Fallout, or I played a bit of Fallout. But I mean, Matt, you were asking about our thoughts on sort of apocalypse and how much we think about the apocalypse. And I think that as a child of the 70s, I think it was kind of really built into my childhood, this general fear that was sort of off the back of the Cold War, really, and the various nuclear, I don't know, brinksmanship that was going on at the time, had a really fundamental impact, certainly on me, and I think many from my generation. And I shared with you not so long ago a poem that I'd written when I was 14 that had ended up in like a local poetry book, and it was really quite graphic about a nuclear bomb going off. And I think, it was interesting to sort of rediscover that, and realize that how fundamental that anxiety was and is in my core. And certainly when things kicked off in between the US and Iran, it became really scary. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, again, that was my first anxiety, was like, oh my gosh, it's nuclear war. So I think the concept of an apocalypse has always been around that nuclear anxiety. But as I've grown up and as I've lived, we've gone through that. We've gone through considerable financial disasters with the 2008 financial crash and the following, I would say, apocalyptic austerity. And then obviously we had COVID, which also felt quite, on the verge of, at any moment that felt like it could spill over into a world-ending disaster. And I think that is one of the things that as human beings, we're so vulnerable to these sorts of things and so unable to actually control what happens or really protect ourselves from them, that it is something that can become very consuming. And I did find that for a while it did become very consuming for me. But I think you do have to take a step back. And I think that's why it's really good that we have games that explore these topics, because they do it in a way that sort of says, yeah, okay, there's really horrible thing happened, but people are still getting on. There is community, there is still friendship, there is still good, good people. There is, and I think that's a really important thing to take away from these stories and these games.
Agree.
Rise.
Yeah. Sorry,
Go
Matt,
ahead.
okay.
After you.
Okay. I was just going to say about how much I think about the apocalypse, which is probably not on the regular, but I do enjoy a good apocalyptic film, TV series, etc., and game, of course. It's funny. I think for me, my most visceral experience of anything like an apocalypse was probably the pandemic, because I felt like the world has changed as a result of it and now cannot go back to the before times. And I think it feels like a lot of people have moved on from COVID, rightly or wrongly. Obviously, I'm still keenly aware of the impact of COVID and of long COVID on a lot of people as well. And it kind of proved to us that we can't just take our world for granted. You're going along happy as Larry, and then suddenly this happens and everything falls away, like almost, or at least a lot of the privilege of our lives fell away, and we found that we had to behave in a whole new way to protect ourselves, and make sure that everyone was safe. And some people abused that, which wasn't very nice either. But yeah, when we were growing up, we always used to do, those things, especially around like places like Facebook and stuff. You'd have the little bits of text that would go around in the event of a zombie apocalypse, tag all these people and they'll be the one that dies first, or the the brains of the operation, or the one that accidentally traps themselves in a trap or whatever, you know. So it was quite sort of, there's a lot of humour attached to sort of ideas, particularly around zombie apocalypses. I think that's a very key cornerstone of our cultural view of apocalypses as well. But as you touched on, Jim, I think the fact that these medias exist allows us to play out disaster scenarios that we might actually fear might happen. And I think the pandemic is the closest we've come to The Last of Us. In sort of the like the way that the virus spread between people. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. But yeah, and it's sort of a safer space to explore highly dramatic events. And obviously, I think we've talked about this on an episode previous, but it's guilt-free violence as well, in that way. So if you are looking to let out a lot of emotion, you might want to be sort of your back against the wall and in that sort of scenario. But I think it's important to remember, as you mentioned as well, Jem, that the key part of a lot of apocalyptic stories is that if we come together, we can survive and support each other, which I think is a really important message too.
Yeah, I have to be very careful with exposing myself to like these extreme thought experiment things, because I have I'm blessed to have an extremely vivid imagination, but cursed with an anxiety disorder and depressive disorder. So if I expose myself to like liberally and unwisely with like apocalypse stuff, it's very easy for me to like to fall down a hole of worrying about that. I agree that COVID is the closest thing I've actually like lived through that has gone, oh yeah, that we weren't ready for that and we didn't see that coming. And one common thread through most apocalypse things is that it is the people in power, those ruling classes, who cause it. And with COVID, we're a fucking island. We are an island surrounded by water. And we had over 100,000 people die of COVID because of the people in charge. And that's never been on the voting like blocks going, right, how would you deal with this situation? Because no one had thought about it before, because you think, well, that sounded like that wouldn't happen. That'd be out of science fiction or something. But then it came in, and the people who we have in power, it's because of our political system and capitalism and corruption and patriarchy. Because when you have private school boys who think it's just jolly good larks, when you have them in power, it's even worse, because they aren't just coming from a place of capitalism, like if they were the leaders of corporations and that's how they came to all of their power. They're doing it from ego and stupidity as well. And so we have, when something like that's an act of nature thing, even though it came from China, apparently it was a man-made in some way. It's still an act of nature that comes through. And if you have earthquakes, you make earthquakes like specific architecture. You need to prepare for things so that when it does happen, then you have things in place for it. But then when you've got like nuclear Armageddon, it's those extremely small like number of people at the top of the most powerful governments who have absolutely no accountability. It is pure luck that there wasn't a nuclear Armageddon in the Cold War. Just like it's pure luck that Margaret Thatcher didn't butcher the NHS when she was in power. For some reason, it is just she could have done it and she could have just done that, and she didn't. So that's luck. And it's luck that COVID wasn't even more dangerous than it turned out to be, or it turned out to be. It could have been worse. It could have not. We could have not been able to make a vaccine. It could have been based on a different number of things. It could have any number of scenarios where it could have been a lot worse, and it's only by luck that it didn't. And when like something bad happens and to me, and I think it's very easy to go, oh, I must have done something wrong, or I wasn't prepared enough, or any kind of like self-critical thing. When if you'd have a government that had planned out for absolutely any eventuality, and they had a plan and they executed it, and it led to a certain amount of like whatever the outcome of that would be. If you can look back at it and genuinely go and believe it and go, I did absolutely everything I had in my power to stop it happening and to mitigate what happened afterwards, you can go to the next part, you can go onwards and think, right, if something like that happened again, we've learned everything that there is to learn about it, and it would be better. Whereas all we got from them was, where we want to thank Boris Johnson, who got the big calls right, which is the most just a awful spin to put on it. And the Horizon games are completely like they were like after my own heart with the villains of them, because it was literally the wealthiest businessman on the planet who made the machines that could power themselves with any form of living matter.
Yeah.
And
well, that's pretty much our current problem, isn't it, with AI?
Yeah. And what you said it earlier on, Alex, about there's that collapse, there's the point of no return thing. Because with COVID, we had like normal, and then we had COVID, and that like changed the way we had to live. And then after a certain amount of time, get the vaccines, and then things go back to normal, even though we're still frogs in boiling water in many different ways. But you can come back from it, like to nuclear brinkmanship. You can come back from that. But then in Horizon, there's that point of no return moment where they realize that mathematically the world's going to end. Every human is going to die, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. And that's the scariest thing for me. It's that there's no it can't go back to normal again. And so you can't just like hold on tight and wait for normal to come back. But it's just it's yeah. So I try and draw a ring around myself for that, and then I can like with you find the fun in a post-apocalypse in gaming, and then I have a very, very small like outlet to read stuff and watch stuff like Survivors to just savor a bit of the awfulness to it, because the series was created by one of the original writers of Doctor Who, or one of the writers in the 70s, and so he created it, and then he wrote a book that was sort of a retelling of some of the bits of it. And you imagine, like in London, only one in 5,000 people survives, and then you think those 5,000, those are 5,000 dead bodies just throughout the entire city. And the first thing you'd go, right, that would, the stench of that would be beyond imagining. And he has this 2-page, one of the best written, like, 2 pages of horror that I've ever read. And it was talking about the first winter after the collapse, and how suddenly, because of the cold, it stopped all the decay and got rid of the smell. So people moved back into London. But then when spring started again, everything melted again, and that the stench returns, and then everyone has to move out. And I appreciate the artistry of it when something so visceral is captured in art. And Survivors has raised the bar on that for that. The starkness of the coming to that realization of we've just gone past the point of no return. Whereas it always feels like, say, with climate change or something, it always still feeling like, even though we're literally boiling in May in the UK, going, oh yeah, we can turn it back. When you go, well, once the ice cap, there's literally no way to refreeze ice caps. We've got a certain amount of cold on the planet, and it's going away.
But that's a positivity bias, isn't it? And I think that humanity does suffer from that quite a lot, that we have this idea, this concept that it'll all work out in the end. And I actually believe that that's down to movies and games sort of telling us that at the end, good will out, and in the end, everything will come good. And I think that in reality, there's no reason why that should be the case. I think that's quite a depressing perspective on the world, but that unfortunately is sort of my position on that we have this positivity bias that things will be okay, and that is what stops us from necessarily tackling some of the things in the ways that we really need to. Climate change is a really good example, because like massive things have to change. We have to change the way we do things in a way that will impact the routines and the things that we currently enjoy. We have to do that, or we are going to seriously suffer as a race. But nobody really has any appetite for doing that. And I think one of the things that pushes that is this idea that, oh, it'll all work out in the end. And so one of the downsides to the sort of post-apocalyptic game worlds is that you play somebody who has survived the apocalypse of whatever, whether you individually survived it or whether you are the descendant of people who survived it, but you are on the winning team in that respect. You're and that's the way we explore it. And I think it creates this dynamic within us that, yes, you're exploring this concept of post-apocalyptic world, but are we just reinforcing this positivity bias that is preventing us from actually fixing the things that need fixing? Yeah. Cheerful topic, man. You're muted.
We can look to Scandinavia for bright hopes, because turns out you can use sand as a battery.
Oh,
If you have a massive, like a load of sand, you can ultra heat it with solar power, and the sand holds the heat forever, for ages. So you can ultra heat this sand battery and then use it for stored energy. So That's my thing. But technology will, if it doesn't save us, it will save us. That's my opinion on it. Right, we will bring the episode to a close there. Thank you both for that. And there's plenty of fun to be had in apocalypse-led games, but try not to worry over much about it, because there's not much we can do at the end of the day. We will, see you every Thursday. We've been streaming a lot more, so go and find us on there as well. We have fun, honest, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. 35 minutes. Oops.
Well done.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.